Hello everyone, it's day 54 and today I have April 26 Indian Express newspaper. So there are two important articles in entire newspaper. One is on the editorial page which is on the page number 10, which is health of on a hot planet, and another is rise of New Japan on the Indian Express explained page. There is one another important article regarding the Portugal's carnation revolution that was happened 50 years ago. So it may be asked, but in the newspaper in the examination, but these two are the very important articles which I'm going to read. So let us see what this health on a hot planet is about to argue. So heat effects on climate change will aggravate problems of infectious diseases. So how it will, let us see. So there is a scientific consensus that 2023 was the hottest year ever in the planet's recorded history. So since around 1901, I think the temperature are being started recorded. So when it says the recorded history, it means from 1901. So it will get progressively worse as this century sweats it out in a sauna of sweltering heat. Indeed, climate modelers forecasting the future say 2023 could be the coolest year in the memory of those born that year. Okay. So as urbanization increases, cities will grow at the expense of the forest to become cauldrons of heat and humidity. The consequences of climate change, mostly mediated through global warming, adversely affected human, animal, and plant health in several ways. So, direct effects of heat exposure on the body, extreme weather events, water scarcity, vector borne and waterborne infections, non communicable diseases, strokes, heart attacks, diabetes, respiratory diseases, cancer. So, non communicable diseases are those diseases which are related to lifestyle problems, mental health disorders, food and nutritional securities due to reduced yield and nutrient quality of crops, health system too will face increased demand due to these and movement of the displaced climate refugees. They will also be affected by the adverse impact of extreme weather events on healthcare infrastructure, supply chains, and personnel. Of these myriad threats, heat waves are of immediate concern as summer advances across the Indian subcontinent. While heat waves are defined both in terms of absolute temperatures recorded and relative rise in comparison to seasonal normal values recorded in earlier years, it is not just the temperature that matters. A heat wave a heat wave represents a combination of heat and humidity. At any level of heat, its impact on human body is amplified if humidity is high in the ambient air. So the India Meteorological Department says that such moist heat stress has increased by 30% between 1980 to 2020. So heat acts through dehydration, inability of the skin to cool the body through perspiration, dilation of blood vessels, and thickening of blood with increased risk of clot formation, which is known as thrombosis. Often air pollution colludes and excess. So thrombosis is the term which is important. Thrombosis. Often air pollution colludes with the excess heat to assault the lungs and blood vessels. Infants and young children are more vulnerable than adults since their bodies have higher fluid content than grown-ups. So among adults, vulnerability is high among the elderly persons with disabilities, and in those with serious como- comorbidities, women are more vulnerable than men. So while the progressively severe effects of the heat stress, heat inclusion, heat stroke, circulatory failure, and death are well recognized, the effect of severe or prolonged heat exposure on non-communicable diseases is not often discussed in the public domain. Yet these can severely damage health through acute and chronic effects. Even as of now, NCDs contribute to 65% of deaths in India, a majority of them in productive midlife. The heat effects of climate change will only exacerbate the problem. So, heat increases the risk of brain strokes, so paralytic attacks due to thrombosis in blood vessels of the brain. Similarly, it can precipitate heart attacks and sudden death by triggering clot formation in the coronary arteries. Exercising vigorously in hot environment can be dangerous. So clots formed in the leg veins can travel to the lungs suddenly, causing catastrophic pulmonary embolism. By reducing the circulating blood volume, heat can damage the kidneys. So the incident of congenital cataracts in babies rises during heat waves. Even surgical wounds don't heal well don't heal well in the excessively hot water. As studies of 266 as a study of 266 studies worldwide published in 2022 revealed that heat waves were associated with a 11.7% increase in mortality. The highest specific risk was for stroke and coronary heart disease. A high risk was also reported for fatal and non-fatal cardiac arrhythmias. As our population ages and cardiovascular risk factors like high blood pressure, diabetes, and obesity rise in our population, every 1 degree centigrade rise in ambient temperature will compound the risk of the serious cardiovascular events. Wildfire triggered by excessively heat release particulate matter PM2.5 and toxic chemicals like ozone, carbon monoxide, uh, poly polycyclic aromatic compounds and nitrogen oxides can cause extensive inflammation, increasing the risk of cardiovascular diseases like heart attack, stroke, heart rhythm abnormalities, pulmonary embolism, heart failure, respiratory diseases, diabetes, and prediabetes. So chemicals like benzene and formaldehyde also present in the wildfire emission increases the risk of cancer. So these are the some things which have been mentioned in this article, which is important to know. And thrombosis is dilatation of blood vessels and thickening of blood will increase the risk of clot formation. So this is thrombolysis. So that is important the term that we need to know. And coming to the second important article about the rise of New Japan. So let us see what this article has to say about the rise of New Japan. This is written by C. Raja Mohan. He is a contributing editor in visiting professor at the Institute of South Asian Studies. So let us see. Japan has given up its post-war pacifism and is working to become a major military power. So a politically resolute and militarily strong Japan contributes to India's objective of building a multipolar Asia. So let us see. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's address to the United States Congress earlier this month and the developments from his summit meeting with the President Joe Biden announced the arrival of new assertive Japan to the world. So Japan is changing, and this is why it matters. So what is the change in Japan? After World War II, a defeated and chastened Japan adopted a policy of pacifism. It avoided building significant armed capability by limiting its defense expenditure and refused to participate in military conflicts anywhere. This pacifism was rooted in Japan's determination to expiate its militarism and imperialism in the pre war decades. So, Japan's pacifism was compensated by its bilateral military alliance with the US. Being a protectorate of the US in Asia, it was free to focus its energies on rebuilding its economy and becoming a commercial and technologically powerhouse by the late 1960s. So, by the turn of the 1970s, Japan became the world's second largest economy behind the US. Today, Japan is set to become the major military power, transforming its famed civilian industrial capability into a military industrial complex and turn from being a US protectorate into an American partner and significant contributor to Asian and Indo-Pacific security. This is the second Japanese transition over the last decade. In the mid 2000s, Japan began to articulate ideas of a new security architecture in the Asia. For instance, the concept of the Indo-Pacific, the single most important geopolitical idea of the 21st century. The late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe first spoke about the strategic unity of the two oceans, that is India and the Pacific, during his visit in India in 2007. Since then, Japan has invested enormous diplomatic, political, and financial resources to popularize this geopolitical construct that was eventually adopted by Australia, Indonesia, India, and the US. In the second transition unfolding today, Japan is matching its strategic ideas with military resources and the political will to actively reshape the regional security order. Kishida's visit to Washington, D.C. was, in fact, the unveiling of a new geopolitical Japan. So, what is the reason for this change? The US has long pressed Japan to take a more active security role in Asia, but Japan, comfortable with its commercial focus, has been unwilling. A mix of external and internal factors have contributed to its reorientation in the 21st century. On the external front, four elements have come together: the rise of China and its military assertion, especially on the territorial disputes with Japan, the deepening military bonds between Beijing and Moscow, and the coordination of their policies in Northeast Asia, the growing military capabilities of North Korea, and the fears triggered by the Trump administration that US could withdraw its security protection to Japan and other Asian allies. Together, these factors have profoundly altered Japan's regional security environment and demanded fresh thinking. So, internally, this situation strengthened conservatives in Tokyo who wanted to see Japan becoming a normal power. They argued that Japan has done enough to prove its credentials as a responsible citizen of world affairs, and the time has come for it to take responsibilities for its own security and to contribute to the regional order. So why is Japan doing? What is Japan doing to become a geopolitical power? First, Japan had done away with the historical cap of defense expenditure unofficially at 1% of its GDP. According to data from the World Bank in 2020, Japan's military expenditure touched 1% of GDP for the first time in 6 decades. In 2022, it touched 1.1%. Kishida's government has pledged to double the annual defense spending to around 10 trillion yen, which is $68 billion by 2027, which would make Japan the world's third biggest military spender after US and China. So second, Japan has acquired and is in the process of further acquiring its own counter strike capabilities in the form of cruise missiles. In January, it signed a deal with the US to purchase up to 400 Tomahawk missiles capable of striking deep into China and North Korea, from relying entirely on the US to building up its own deterrent capabilities is a major shift. Third, late last year, Japan eased its self-imposed ban on exports of lethal weapons to friendly nations. This has paved the way for the leveraging of Japan's immense manufacturing and technological base to aid allies at a time when their own production capacities cannot keep up with the likes of China and Russia. So, immediately after the easing of the export ban, Japan approved a shipment of Japanese-made Patriot missile to the US. Along with the United Kingdom and Italy, Japan is leading the Global Combat Air Program, a multinational initiative to develop the base system. So, system Tempest, a proposed sixth generation stealth fighter. So, during the Kishida's visit, Japan and the US finalized the creation of a joint military industrial council to facilitate the co production of weapons. Fourth, Japan and US are in the process of revising the command and control framework governing their defense forces, with plans to eventually significantly integrate the command structure. Currently, the US operates military bases in mainland Japan and Okinawa Island, but its command structure is in Hawaii. The headquarters of the US Indo Pacific Command, a joint operation command, will be set up in Japan going forward. So, has Japan's diplomatic posture changed? So Japan has made attempt to end disputes with South Korea inherited from Imperial Japan's 1910-45 occupation of the Korean Peninsula. The reconciliation has facilitated greater regional security coordination and has helped the US move from a system of bilateral alliances in Asia to a regional security network in which US allies work with each other. Second, Japan has one of Ukraine's strongest supporter in the war with Russia. It has offered Ukraine a lot of aid for reconstruction and had sent some weapons as well. So Japan had been alone in Asia to make a clear case of defending Ukraine. Kishida has often said that Ukraine could be the future of Asia. Ukraine could be the future of Asia if the principle of respecting territorial sovereignty is not defended in Europe. Right, right, okay. In his address to Congress, Kishida almost chastised Republicans for their reluctance to extend more support to Ukraine. I detect an undercurrent of self doubt among some Americans about what your role in the world should be, he told Congress. Ukraine of today may be East Asia of tomorrow. Japan will continue to stand with Ukraine, he said. It was a powerful statement signaling Japan's willingness to wait in the US domestic debate on Ukraine and to encourage Republicans in the Congress to rethink their opposition to sending more military assistance to Kiev. So, what are the implications of this new Japan? Will this push last? Japan was among the most powerful countries in the World War II with fearsome military that marched all the way to India's border. After decades of pacifism, a politically active and militarily more capable Japan will inevitably rearrange the regional security calculus. Despite the widespread fear that the policies outlined by Kishida, whose political stature has been in decline at home, may not last, structural factors are likely to ensure broad continuity in Japan's new orientation. The potential return of Trump to the White House is also intensifying the effort in Tokyo to ensure against an American turn towards insolationism. So, how has India reacted to this change? New Delhi has not issued a formal reaction to the recent changes in Japan's policy, but India has no quarrels with Japan's historical role in Asia. Many in the Indian national movement, including Subhash Chandra Bose, turned to Imperial Japan for support in the war for independence from Great Britain. So, in the early years of independence, Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru insisted that both China and Japan must play their rightful role in shaping the future of the post-war Asia. So, India's bilateral relationship with Japan has acquired a political character over the last 2 decades, but the potential for a military cooperation between the two countries remains unrealized. So, and there is a scope for New Delhi and Tokyo to discuss military industrial collaboration. So, at the end of the day, a politically resolute and militarily strong Japan can build a stable Asian equilibrium in a positive development from the Indian perspective. It contribute to India's objective of building a multipolar Asia in a multipolar world. Okay, so this was the about the rise of Japan, rise of New Japan. So that's all from today's newspaper. So we'll meet with some other important articles from tomorrow's newspaper. So till then,